Hello, everybody. I'm Julie D, and welcome to my Inner Circle speaker series. Now, I have two guests today. I have Coach Joe Panito, and Susan Eileen, I believe.
Yes.
And we are recording this on a Monday morning, so you're going to have to forgive us if things go awry.
Exactly.
So, Joe and I just finished a video the other day about how to be happier by thinking differently. And he was telling me about Susan and a book that they're working on. So, of course, I wanted to know more.
Well, thank you very much, Julie. And it's been great to spend time with you. And I'm really excited to share with you and the audience and introduce Susan Eileen. Susan is a young woman that I met about a year and a half ago now um, in, uh, in a professional coaching relationship. And it has morphed into really Susan spearheading the writing of her memoir, and into both of us now working together in terms of both coaching those that are in recovery for their addictive behavior. So I am really excited to share the stage with Susan Eileen today.
Thank
So, Susan, tell me a little about yourself.
I am currently single and living in Broadview Heights. I taught science at Brecksville Broadview Heights for about 15 years. And that career actually sort of came crashing down because of my addiction. But things are now looking up. I am approaching 3 years of sobriety, which is great. I'll have my soberversary this December. And now I have a book coming out, and I'm just really excited about the future now. And as they say, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. So I have a very active life now, and things couldn't be better considering I used to, I did, I guess we'll talk about this more when we get into the book, but my addiction had gotten to the point where I was a 24/7 drinker. So, yeah.
Wow.
Drinking as soon as I woke up in the morning, and it got me to the point where, my liver was starting to fail and I was having seizures. And I mean, had I continued, I probably wasn't that far away from dying from my disease.
Yeah, it's terrible disease, and it affects. I mean, everybody watching this, it's affected them somehow. A friend, a
Right,
relative.
right.
It's,
I
I don't
I
know.
mean, how happy hour turned into an all day, everyday thing. I I'm assuming there's a genetic component that I probably couldn't escape. And it was, I like to think that if this didn't happen or if that didn't happen, I wouldn't have become an alcoholic. Um, but yeah, it was probably just inescapable.
Yeah, a lot
So,
of
who started the idea for the book? Was it Joe or was it Susan?
it's all Susan. It's all
Yeah,
Susan. It's really her story.
well, I don't know. I remember, Joe, when we first started talking, I think you invited me to write a book with you. I had always wanted to write a book, uh, but I really couldn't see how my book, just as a memoir, would be different than anything out there. There's a whole new genre of book called Quit Lit. And, you know, there's a whole new genre about people quitting, drinking or heroin or escaping the criminal justice system. But I wanted to put out something that was a little different. And, Joe has this new 5-tier process instead of the 12 steps to break free of an addiction. And so we sort of joined heads And so it is part memoir, part self-help. So Joe really was the impetus for getting this book going. He even though I suppose I wrote the bulk of the book, he wrote the program and also sort of acted as a manager and found the publisher and did the legwork that way. Because I'm a great ideas person, but the details are mystifying to me sometimes. And he's a great details person, so we make a good team.
It's worked out really well, and it's
Yeah,
interesting because, you know, Susan, I mean, we all have our own addictive behavior that we have to own. I have addictive behavior like other people do, but Susan comes at the addiction from a very personal perspective because of how she's lived it and has been able to break free, to have that and think differently about herself and just have this amazing life, which is the life that she deserves.
yeah, very much so. I have a wonderful life now. I have a beautiful home in Broadview Heights, and I have two very successful daughters. Uh, and now this book is coming out, and I'm hoping that it's the first of many books. And yeah, things are just it's very exciting.
And if your book even helps one person, it's worth it.
Exactly. And I was telling a friend I went out for coffee with the other night, and I said, excuse me, uh, my greatest fear will that I will write this book and then it won't be as successful as I wanted it to be. And she said, well, that's why I don't try things like that, because I have a fear of failure. And I thought to myself, and I said to her, I said, I'd rather have failed than not have tried at all. The biggest, crime would be not even trying. And I mean, you could even then transfer that idea to sobriety. Well, I'd rather not get sober. What if I fail? Well, again, Thomas Edison, when he tried a thousand different ways, to get a light bulb to work, it was he said he found a thousand ways. Oh, now it is
Yeah,
totally escaping.
a
But there's a
thousand
famous,
ways how not to make a light bulb.
right, 1,000 different ways to succeed,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah, yeah. You know what? And it's interesting because Susan, there's a lot of songs out there. The one song that comes to mind right now as she's talking is from a female guitar virtuoso named Oriante. And the song, one of the lyrics is not how many times you get knocked down, but how many times you get up.
Exactly.
Susan, went through a total of three what we would call rock bottoms before reaching this point.
And I had posted another way to look at things, though, is, I was in active addiction for at least 5 years. And the only thing I can say is at least I I didn't spend that long in active addiction. There are some people that have had my struggle since high school. And while the foundation for my addiction may have been laid in high school, it didn't really get a solid grip on me um, until much later in life. But yeah, I mean, you could argue that any day that I chose alcohol over my job and family was a rock bottom. You could argue that I had 1,500 days of rock bottoms before I finally, and most people, their rock bottom is death. That's the sad part. The statistics are that less than 10% of people will actually get sober. So we're hoping that this book will change that. So, and I have been promoting it on TikTok. I'm up to almost a million, views on TikTok. So, And TikTok is great. It gives you the analytics.
Mhm.
So the demographic that is following me the most is a group in the 20s and the 20 somethings from 21 to 27. So if I had to think, there's that whole 27 club, people are very likely to die from their addiction in their late 20s. That's when everything starts to catch up with them. So I think maybe I'm getting a bunch of followers, people who want to get their addiction, I don't want to say under control. I use the expression put your addiction in remission because it'll always be there. But right now it's in remission because I'm not using, but they want to put it in remission before they get married so they can have kids. And also I have a whole bunch of high schoolers because as much as people like to bash Hollywood entertainers and performers, the kids do look up to them. And so they are going to want to, do what their idols are doing, and their idols are getting sober. Eminem is now, I think, on 10 years of sobriety. So
Yeah, I
there's a
think it is
sober
helpful.
revolution. Yeah, I'm
I think
sorry.
it is helpful when celebrities do share that they're real and they make mistakes and they have problems, because
Mhm.
then, it shows people publicly that, oh, well, maybe if they can get help, maybe I can get help too.
Yeah. The important thing too to share, Julie, is that the most visible addictive behavior is the alcohol, the substance abuse, but addictive behavior crosses all boundaries, and people are affected by shopping addictions, by gambling addictions, by sex addictions, pornography addictions. There's a lot of different addictive behavior that can be just as damaging. Um,
Now,
as
what's the definition of being addicted? Because some people may not even know they're addicted.
Yeah, well, I'll let Susan answer that one too, but I think really plain and simple, it is when you don't have the ability to control the behavior, from a sense that, for example, probably about 20% of the people that have ADHD, adults with ADHD, form addictive behavior, and that is because they don't have, or they lack, the impulse control. So when we do part of the the 5 steps that are involved in the Breaking the Chains program, identifies where people have that lack of self-control, and you just can't stop. And then sometimes too, it is comparing yourself to others. Susan has a great phrase that originally started early on in terms of ideas for the book, and that being an at-leaster. And Susan, why don't you share a little bit about that?
So a lot of people will not quit drinking, if they are in some sort of, meeting or talking with their doctor or their friends, they'll say, well, I don't really have a problem. This person has 3 felonies. This person went to jail. This person has 5 DUIs. So I would say, why would you wait till you have 3 felonies and 5 DUIs to quit? If you have 1 DUI, it's I'm a big fan of the expression, quit while you're ahead. So if you have only 1 DUI and 2 misdemeanors, it's very acceptable to quit now, before you're homeless. It's acceptable to quit before you lose your job and your wife and your kids. There's no reason why you have to have a complete rock bottom where you are living under a bridge and eating, food from an emergency hunger center. No, there's no reason to let your addiction get that bad.
Yeah, part of it is that at least mentality. And I remember one of Susan's early essays was Notes from an At-leaster, because it's, well, at least I don't have 3 felonies. At least I don't have a DUI. At least I'm not drinking at 11 o'clock in the morning. And then all of a sudden, those boundaries shift
Right.
into
And
more.
then all of a sudden they become, well, you should really think of those at least statements as yets.
Mhm.
So instead of saying, at least I don't have 3 felonies, say, I don't have 3 felonies yet. Instead of saying, at least I don't have 5 DUIs and I'm not homeless, think of, I'm not homeless yet.
Mhm.
So that is, that's really the way you need to reframe. And I think any struggle that you're having in your life, you can reframe. There's something that I've read about called the context effect.
Mhm.
So really, what we're trying to do is put sobriety into a positive light. For some reason, people think of sobriety as, grim and boring. And so that's what I've been showing. And instead of saying I quit, say I began a life of sobriety. Don't say I quit drinking. I began a life of sobriety and purpose. And if you reframe how you think of it in your head, then all of a sudden it actually isn't as hard as a lot of people. Now, don't get me wrong, early sobriety is tough. And that's only because you have 24 hours a day on your hands. And you don't know what to do with yourself. So you will end up, you need to line up hobbies, and you should really consult with a doctor before you do any of this, because I'm not a doctor and Joe's not a doctor. So you need to get your sort of ducks in a row. But
Yeah, that's important. And Susan brings up a great point, because it has to be a holistic approach, because often, if not the majority of the time, addictive behavior is going to be driven by some sort of life experience and trauma that you have to work through with a licensed medical professional, whether it's a therapist, a psychologist, a psychiatrist. There also can be a lot of comorbidities where maybe there is bipolar, or schizophrenia, or some other issue that has to be dealt with medically. If those things aren't in place, then coaching is pretty much forward looking. We're looking at where you are and where you want to go. When Susan and I start working with someone, those other things are looking at the past. You're dealing with medical professionals to figure out how you got where you are. We're trying to get you from where you are to where you want to go. And it's all about positive psychology. When I became a coach, there was a big emphasis for me, is focusing on don't focus on what you don't have. Let's focus on what you have, and those strengths that you have. And that's what Susan and I are doing now. And now it's time for Julie. I'm going to steal your podcast and your video for a second for a shameless plug. So any of the viewers that want to get more information, you can reach out to Susan. Susan's website is sobrietyinsightscoach.com. And Susan, what's your actual email address?
Susan Designs 707 at gmail.com.
And the website is sobrietyinsightscoach.com.
Insight, no S.
Insight.
Yeah.
Insight.
And I'm on TikTok under Sober Queen of Hearts.
Yeah. And then my website, you'll see up there. So DPS for Life, which stands for Developing Positive Skills for Life, which is all about what we're talking about, is positive skills that will help you cope with life's challenges. Life is a challenge. You will never have a point where you have no challenges or something that's not stressful that may trigger you, but it's how you handle that. And that's what we're talking about. And then people can reach out to me at Coach Joe at dpsforlife.com.
Did you have a screen that you wanted to share with us, Joe?
Yeah. So thank you, Julie. So this is, can you folks see that?
Can now.
Yeah, beautiful. All right. So all I did was put together the pieces that already existed. So part of the beginning of this is self-awareness. I really like there's a ton of assessments out there. I really like the VIA character strengths report. So someone who comes to work with Susan and I will do this assessment first. So Susan did this assessment, and it identifies the 24 specific character strengths and ranks them in terms of how much you rely on them. You find out what your signature strengths are, those 5 that are just you, those are your go-to strengths, the ones you always rely on. You also find your 5 lesser strengths. Again, like Susan and I were talking about, it is all positive. So they're not negative, they're just lesser strengths. And those are ones that you have to build up on. So those with addictive behavior, it might be perseverance, it might be self-control, it might be any multitude of things. And, Susan, maybe, if you want to share a little bit about what you found out about yourself with the self-awareness assessment.
The self-awareness assessment. Wow. Oh, well, I'm trying to remember, but because it was probably almost 2 years ago,
Yeah.
but I definitely have a love of learning and an appreciation of beauty, a zest for life are the 3 that I remember.
Mhm.
And we did revisit it, and the
Mhm.
thing that changed the most from early sobriety to once I had established sobriety was my sense of humor,
Mhm.
because you will laugh more in sobriety than you ever did when you were addicted. And there is a joy to being sober, to getting that monkey off of your back, as the expression goes.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing too, with that appreciation of beauty, Susan talked about having hobbies. And when you get into sobriety, Susan spends a lot of her time with the group is called Explorer Chicks, I believe, and goes hiking all the time. So there is
Yeah.
a great way to spend your time out in nature, walking, getting exercise. So improving your physical health, and then it's all part of reinforcing those changes.
And
The other
Susan,
aspect, oh,
I was
I
just going to say,
was gonna
Susan,
say-
we were talking before the recording started, and how, what helped you is just simple things like changing your diet and, exercising. People wouldn't even think that getting more sleep and those type of things really helped your recovery.
well, honestly, so I am bipolar, and that is one of the many reasons why people develop an addiction problem, because they're self-medicating a mental illness. So you might be self-medicating anxiety or insomnia or uncomfortable mood swings that you're not even sure why you had them, but you're self-medicating anger and resentment, and you end up self-medicating like every normal human emotion, which obviously isn't healthy. But between sleep and diet and exercise, I no longer, even if I can even say it, but I no longer even have a mental illness. I no longer even feel bipolar. um as I said, apparently a lot of my mental health problems actually stemmed from a poor diet, poor sleep, and poor exercise habits. So once I know it sounds cliche, but once I started treating my body as a temple, it became a temple. I mean, so it now everything is functioning. One time I was having an anxiety attack, and for anybody watching who has crippling anxiety attacks, I can't do anything. I can't read, I can't cook, I can't do anything during an anxiety attack, and they can last a full 36 hours. And I contacted my doctor, and he said, well, have you been binge eating? And I said, as a matter of fact, I did like binge eat a cake. It was so good I could barely help myself, and I ate probably 5 servings instead of 1. And he said all of that red dye and fake chocolate is actually what caused the anxiety attack. So, and I remember 30 years ago, they talked about a guy who had lost touch with reality and killed somebody. And they said, his lawyer said it was the Twinkie effect. And basically that a diet of fast food and junk food caused his screws to come loose. And I know it sounds far-fetched, but I guess I can say that I've actually experienced that. I mean, too much junk food, and all of a sudden I'm anxious, and all of a sudden the symptoms of mania or depression may return, and it's, as they say, that the truth is stranger than fiction. So it is true that a lot of our problems are simply from the lifestyle we lead.
And that is a great example of how a simple thing in terms of a lack of self-control with binging on cake, binging on potato chips, binging on whatever, which is not very healthy food, can have a chain reaction and effects. So once we go through that self-awareness, and Susan's right, we did the assessment when we first started working together about close to 2 years ago, and then last year, and you do see the difference. So you can see where the changes and the shifts are coming with those individual characteristics, those lesser strengths that you're trying to move up the ladder, and finding balance so that you don't overuse those signature strengths. So that really is the foundation. The second one is second, third, and fourth are actually all tied together. So I'm a certified trainer, and Susan will soon to be a certified trainer in what's called 3 vital questions, or it's also known as the empowerment dynamic. And it is all about where you're focused. Are you focused on things that you don't have and the problems that you do have, or are you focused on where you're trying to get to, that outcome? So the focus is one. The second one is how you're relating to yourself and to others. Again, a lot of times there is trauma in someone's history, so you feel like you've been a victim. You feel that you don't have any control over your life, and those coping mechanisms you used as a teenager or young adult. Susan mentioned some of the addictive behavior was founded in high school. Those coping mechanisms to kind of zone out and drink to forget your problems. But the problem is still there. That's the problem. It never goes away. So we talk about what are you focused on, and then we talk about your relationship with yourself and your relationship with other people. And then we talk about actions. What actions are you taking to move forward? So that's a real big chunk of this. And then we end with this program has a requirement of either a 6-month or a 1 year. Now, what's required is at least 6 months of coaching. So one-on-one coaching with either 2 60-minute calls per month or 1 60-minute call per month, depends on what the client wants. But that helps reinforce and help you build some positive momentum. Susan and I are essentially accountability partners for you to say, okay, so where are you? What are your next steps? Let's build in that accountability to make sure you're still getting forward momentum and that you're reinforcing what you're learning and applying what you're learning. So that's really important, and that's essentially what those goes through the process. I tried to keep it simple when I developed it with things that I knew, and with the philosophy is from that keep it simple. Susan's got she comes up with a lot of interesting sayings, and one of the sayings that came up frequently is maybe 12 steps aren't enough, or are too much, because we're certainly not knocking anything. If something works for someone, it's great, it's awesome. There's a lot of great programs out there, but not every program works for an individual. Someone may not respond in that particular program or a program, but will respond in this one. And the bottom line is, if you're getting healthier, that's what matters.
Well, and Julie and I were talking about this a little beforehand, but the exact, marketing slogan, I guess, would be, if the 12 steps are too much or not enough, try breaking the chains. So 12 steps can be too much in that they want you to meet every single day. They want you to stay in the past. They want you to talk about what you did in high school when, like, really there's no purpose to that whatsoever. We need to look forward, not back. There's no point. As a matter of fact, when I went to go do step 4, I was told, well, a lot of people will relapse doing step 4. Well, then why would you have them do step 4 if they're going to relapse doing step 4? So it can be overbearing. So it can be too much, and it can also be not enough, because you need a doctor, you need a therapist, you need exercise, you need a diet and sleep. And I was routinely told to skip doctor's appointments, to go to meetings, or to skip sleep, to go to meetings. And really, you're supposed to remember the acronym HALT. When you're having a craving, are you hungry, angry, lonely, or tired? And I told everybody right from the beginning that if I have insomnia, I will relapse, because I will drink to fall asleep. So you should never tell anybody that driving on a lack of sleep to a meeting is a good idea. So, like I said, 12 steps can be too much or not enough. And as Joe said, if you're doing a 12-step program and it works for you, we're not trying to convert you. So this is a more of a secular program, and it would be helpful no matter if you're an atheist, Catholic, or Buddhist, because we don't, in any of our meetings, we haven't really talked about that much about higher powers. I know numerous people who are atheists who have used the higher power of themselves, their personal best. And if that's what works for you, if you create a vision board of your personal best and that works for you, then by all means do it.
I mean, to me, 5 steps sounds a lot easier than 12.
Exactly. As they say in marketing, keep it simple, stupid. And so on my TikTok, I will say, why should you get sober? Because you're going to have fun, you're going to look better, and it's going to save money. You don't need to get sober for some, because you want to become a millionaire. Not everybody wants to become a millionaire. It is just, if there's any time to give yourself a raise, because putting your addiction in remission, you will give yourself a raise overnight. And if you look at the economy and where it's headed, there is never a better time to give yourself a raise than right now.
Yeah, Susan, I am so glad you said that, because when I first met Susan had an app on her phone that you input what you would normally spend on your addiction, and then it tracks it. So every day that you are addiction free. And Susan, would you mind sharing what you're up to right now?
I am up to probably almost $40,000, and that's just the money that I saved at the bar. That it does not take in lost time from work, money to lawyers, money to bail bondsmen, wrecked cars, hospital stays, psych ward visits, rehabs. I mean, not only, I saved my life, which is priceless, but I've literally saved $40,000 just from the bar, and not the legal fees. Not, like I said,
Wow.
not the wrecked cars. And then if anything, your money like snowballs. If, as they say, this one book that I read, momentum is greater than effort. So whether it is time spent at a job, money in the bank, or time spent in sobriety, everything gets easier, because like a snowball going down a hill, momentum is greater than that initial inertia you have to overcome. And
That,
so,
yeah, that inertia is so hard because we have coping mechanisms that we've dealt with since we were teenagers, and that's what we go back to. It's kind of like driving down a road that is muddy and you're in the tracks of the car in front of you, and it gets very uncomfortable. And when people have a recurrence in their addiction, it's because it's too uncomfortable to get out of the ditch and to try a different way. And it's easier to just fall back in line with what you did in the past and have that drink or have that whatever your addictive behavior of pleasure is. So it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. It's not an easy journey, but as Susan will testify, it is a journey that is well worth the effort.
Well, I hope somebody watching this can maybe see that there's a way out.
yes, I certainly hope so.
Well, we would love to be back with you when the book launches, and that's
Yes.
at a date yet to be determined, but it will be before the end of the year. The exact date is not out there, but Susan's been working on where we're gonna, options for book signings. So she's actively working on that, and we're gonna be all over the place. And we would love to share the next installment with you, Julie.
Well, that sounds great. And once we have dates and more information, we can put that down in the description in the video. So
Yeah,
this will be, updated, and future videos that we do about this topic can also be linked down below too. So
absolutely.
stay tuned for more information.
Yeah. So Susan, one more time for folks to reach out to you, what's that contact?
My email is susandesigns707@gmail.com. You can follow me on TikTok under Sober Queen of Hearts, and you can check out my website at sobrietyinsightcoach.com.
There you go.
And we'll have that information down below too, so people can click on them.
That sounds awesome. And I'm at Coach Joe at DPS for Life. We also have a Facebook group called Breaking the Chains Recovery Support. So people can check that out online on Facebook. And my website is dpsforlife.com.
Any final thoughts?
I would just say that the journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. And if you've ever thought about putting your addiction in remission, I think you're probably thinking about it more than you know if you've decided to watch this video. So just keep going with the momentum.
That's it. Again, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint.
Exactly.
And when you get uncomfortable, when you feel uncomfortable, that's when the growth and that's when the change is starting. So don't lean into it. Don't shy away from it. And we really appreciate your time today, Julie.
Oh, I appreciate the time with you two this morning. And Susan, I just want to say how brave you are. It takes a certain person to, share their story, and some of it, it's like hard for us to hear, but I'm sure other people can probably really relate to it. So I just really appreciate you
that
doing that.
Thank you. And I do share my story because a lot of people are dying in silence. I also don't ascribe to the anonymous portion of recovery because my addiction wasn't anonymous. My arrests weren't anonymous, and me becoming almost homeless wasn't anonymous. So why should my recovery be anonymous? And my obituary won't be anonymous. Your life is not anonymous. Your recovery shouldn't be anonymous either.
Yeah, I guess everybody around you saw the problem too.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, they probably knew it before I did.
Which is what often happens. And actually, that's a great point that Susan brought up from an anonymity standpoint. The way the program works, if someone wants to do a small group, and we'll limit it to maybe 5 people, but go through this 5-step process as a small group and then do individual one-on-one coaching. So you go through the assessment, you go through the 3 vital questions, empowerment dynamic together, because there is strength in numbers and supporting each other, or we can do the whole thing one-on-one. So it just depends on what somebody is comfortable with.
Well, Joe, I want to thank you too for taking the time, and I'm looking forward to future videos that we're going to be doing and follow-ups with Susan.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate the time, and thank you very much for the opportunity.
All
Well,
right, thank you.
I think that's it for now. We always leave them wanting more.
Exactly.
All right. Well,
All
we're
right.
signing out now.
That's
Thank
it.
you for watching.
Happy Monday, everybody.
Happy Monday. Goodbye.